All right, so what is the purpose of a testimonial on a website? Basically, it's to convince people through social proof that this particular product or service is worth purchasing or at least worth having faith in based on what other people have said. So a testimonial will always include the actual testimonial, the quote of the person. Also, it's a good idea to also include the name just to obviously have it increase the believability. You should always have real testimonials. And then you should also include, if possible, although it's not a requirement, a actual avatar or a picture of the person. And that way it increases, again, more the validity of the statement itself. You can also include the location of the user that may be relevant or it may not be relevant based on the type of product or service you're offering. Also their title, their company name. So we're going to create a testimonial, and I'm going to create a bunch of variations of it so you can see how much options we have in terms of a layout that you have based on the testimonial, a person's name, and a photograph of that person. All right, so let's get started here. What we'll do is click on the frame tool, and we're going to start off here with desktop, and I'm just going to drag this up a little bit more. And we're going to start off, and we're going to do a light version, but we're going to have a dark version as well. We're going to start off with the dark version, and we're just going to come out here in the fill, and we're going to choose somewhere around this blue, a lot of tone, but also quite dark. And this happens to be 292D33 if you want to follow along with this. Also, it'd be a good idea to add it to your color styles. So we'll just call this background. And let's start with just a title here. So I'm going to take the type tool, hit T on your keyboard, left click, and we'll just type in user reviews. You could use testimonials as well for that copy. All right, so for this, I'm going to use a font that we haven't quite used yet, and it's a serif font called Newton, N-E-U-T-O-N. And that's a Google font, so you can go to fonts.google.com, type that in, and install that. Or actually, rather, being that we're in Figma, it's already here. Sorry about that. Sometimes I use Adobe XD where fonts have to be installed. All right, so user reviews, that's pretty good for an actual title. And let's create a basically 4 columns of a user review. All right, so this first design iteration is going to be a card-based design. And I'm going to show you also how to break outside of the card itself in a little bit. So all I'll do is just drag out roughly what I think the width should be. And we can always change that, so it's okay if it's not perfect. And what I'll do here is we're going to grab the color of the background, and we're just going to go up slightly right there. It's a very subtle difference, but it doesn't have to be high contrast because this panel itself isn't a piece of type. So hopefully that makes sense. And we can also add this to our styles and just call this panel color. All right, and if you want, we can round the corners. It's not required. I'm just choosing to round them very slightly at a value of 4. And then let's go ahead and get the actual quote here. So I'm going to left click, drag out right around here, and I'm going to put in a specific piece of type here. Let's see here. I'm not going to use lorem ipsum for this. I'm just going to say I can't imagine a better piece of software for task management. So we'll assume this is a task management software. Now we could wrap this in quotes like this, and there would be nothing wrong with that. Of course, we want to work with our visual hierarchy first before we start dealing with the topography specifically here. You don't want this to be the same size as this right up here. So I'm going to scale this down, but I'm also going to use a different font. Times New Roman, and italicizing it actually looks pretty good. I like the look of that. So I'm going to stick with this, and we'll also go ahead and center this as well. All right, we can also increase this a little bit. So the size is 22, or italic, and it's looking pretty good. I think maybe we'll drag that in like that. All right, and with these quotes right here, we can remove those and we can style those too, and make them a little bit more graphically interesting. So what I mean by that is we'll take the type tool, we'll just click over here, and we'll put in a quote, and we're going to make this large. So we're going to click over here, hit the up arrow on the keyboard, and let's change this. Let's see what Newton's look like. And that looks pretty fine to me right here. Now, I can also, because the quote itself isn't a very important element, we can drop down the contrast quite a bit. So we can grab this, and then we can come up here, just like that. It's okay if it's a low contrast element in this context, because really it's an afterthought as opposed to the actual type right here. So we can duplicate that, and then we can just hold shift and rotate this to create a closing quote right here. And a front-end developer dealing with CSS would be able to pull this off quite easily. All right, so one thing I want to do right away, I want to see how much space we have here. So if we duplicate that, good. So these are a good size already. And what we'll do now is we'll go ahead and put the fictional name. So I'm just going to put Gary Simon. Of course, way too large. And let's also change up the font. So we'll just do Poppins for this. And we don't want it italic, just the quote itself. And we'll make this regular. And then maybe we'll come down to 16, something quite small. You wouldn't want to go smaller than that. And perhaps we could increase this a little bit. That way we really increase this the typographic visual hierarchy. And we can also grab this color and then just add tint to it. There we go. So now we have a nice separation visually between these elements. Now, one thing we need to check is the contrast. Does this contrast enough against this? It might not. So let's give this a test. So select both of them. We'll go to plugins and we'll go to Stark and we will check the contrast. And it does not. All right, so let's close this out. Yeah, it's a 2.77. So what we'll want to do is increase this to right around there. And there we go, 4.15. Now that's for large text though. Small text, if you hover over this little question mark, passing color results are accurate only if your font is at least 16 pixels with regular weight or heavier. And this right here would be large text. So this is size 16 and it's regular. So we would want to make sure that this is actually a little bit higher. So we're going to add more. Now it's 5.46 and we're good. Okay, great. So now we can also add a little dash. You don't necessarily have to, but it does help. It's a conventional pattern for the testimonial authors, so to speak. So we can just take a line and we could use the same color as the type itself. We can group both of those. All right. And we'll take this as well. We're going to take this with the quotes, and right here, these three elements, and we will group those as well. All right. Oops, this one did not get grouped in here for some reason. Let's right click and ungroup that. Select both of those, right click and group. There we go. And let's also add a image. So what we'll do first is give it a container, and typically the most common shape for this is going to be a circle in which you have a user's face inside. So now we can right click with it selected and go to unsplash. We can search up here and just type person. All right, let's choose that person right there. And there we go. So now let's get this situated. See what it looks like. It's always a good idea to kind of zoom in and zoom out just to see how it looks. Sometimes if you're unsure of your design decisions and you've been working on it for a while, taking a break and just stepping away from the computer for an hour and then coming back will help do you wonders. Suddenly you'll see, this is what's wrong. All right, so the only thing that's bothering me here about this type is this letter spacing right here. It's a little funky. So what I'll do instead, typically I probably find just a different font, but this works right here. I cannot imagine. Okay, all right, so this works, and maybe we'll make this person a little bit bigger. And at this point, if you wanted to, let's get this lined up here. If you wanted to, you could take all 4 of these elements. You can right click and choose add auto layout. Now if that happens and it throws off the flow, you can come over here and then click center, and there we go. So now if you wanted to, you can move things around if you wanted to. So now we can right click and we can create a component, and then we can duplicate the component, move it over, and then Control D a few more times. And there you go. So this is what we have going on for our testimonial section, and it works just fine. All right, so let's create some variations of this just so I can show you. You have a lot of subjective options in terms of how you style things like this. So what I'll do is I'm going to delete those 3, right click, and then detach the instance, because I don't want this to change if I change this. So then what I can do is right click and create the component again. So it's a new component. And on this one, what I'm going to change up is the position of this person's face. So now if we right click, we'll choose detach the instance. That way if we make changes to this, it won't affect the ones that we already have over here. And what we can do for just another pattern for this that's pretty common is we can take this is an auto layout right now. If I drag this out, it will no longer be in the auto layout. And now it's just these 2 elements. So now I can take both of these, right click, and create a component. And this is another approach, a real quick adjustment, if you will, to a common pattern you see for user testimonials or reviews. So now we could take this, replicate it a few times, duplicate and duplicate. It is thunderstorming outside right now. I'm not sure if you can hear that thunder. And there we go. All right, so we can do quite a bit more as well. What if we wanted to break outside of the card containers themselves? Let's go ahead and duplicate. And this time what we'll do is go ahead and delete these. It is thunder outside. It's going crazy right now. Let us now right click, detach the instance. We will create the component once more. And then we'll double click here and we'll get rid of this panel color. So now what we can do is duplicate this and duplicate it a couple more times. And if we wanted to help create a little bit of a line separator, we could take the line tool, drag it down. We'll come over here, take the background color, and then just come up slightly. And you can give it a little bit more color if you wish by dragging over here to the right. And that's pretty good right there. And then we can duplicate that, Control D, put this here in the middle, and then duplicate it once more. So this is a completely fine pattern as well to use for the cards. So as you can see, we started with this. Then we adjusted this portion up here to be on top of the card container. Here's one without backgrounds. All right, and what else could we do? So let's say, for instance, we wanted to really emphasize a particular quote from somebody who's very notable. So what we could do is really use visual hierarchy to create that emphasis. So one such way of doing so, let's see which one we will use. let's use this one right here. And I will take all these. We're going to push them down to make room for one big single quote up here. All right, so now we have some good space. And I'll just go ahead and double click into here, and then I'll copy I'll copy that and then paste it outside of here. And hold Alt and drag this out. Now I'm going to right click and ungroup this because we'll have to manually place these items more than likely. And let's increase this. So we're going to increase the typographic visual hierarchy. We want people to see this one first and foremost. So logically speaking, we're going to put it at the top, and then also it's going to be larger. So this is a pretty good size right here. And then we can take these quotes and we can also boost the size accordingly. And what is that size? That's a size 103. So we'll put 103 and then put this one right up here. All right, that looks pretty good right there. Let's go ahead and delete this part. Oops, there we go. And then we can take, let's see here. We'll take one of the avatars here. And we'll go ahead and then also take one of the names. We'll drag it over here. In this one, we can increase the size as well. So we're going to double click into there. Actually, I'm going to right click and ungroup that. And then we'll go ahead and increase the size of the name. And you could do it like this if you wish. We could probably get rid of this and just put these two next to each other, group them, and then center them like that. And there's probably other layout variations. We could possibly put this up here, or maybe just the avatar and then the name down here. But this right here is pretty good. I might want to scale this down just a bit. Like that. So now we've created a secondary or a primary testimonial here, and this one works pretty well. And they work obviously as one section of testimonials together, except just emphasizing this important one over here. All right, so that looks pretty good. Now let's talk about if we wanted to create like a light variation of this. So let's take the original, and then let's go ahead and we'll take the background. And first, before we do that, let's go ahead and delete these and just go through that process again of detaching the instance and then right-clicking and creating a component. And let's create, let's say for instance, the background was white, just all white. Let's change that rather here, detach that and just make it white. So now we're gonna take the fill. This could be black. Yeah, let's just leave it black. And then you could just stick with this, but me personally, I don't like how much contrast there is between the card and the background. So what I'll do is double click into here and we'll change the panel color to something that's just barely noticeable. And again, you could take this approach as well where you don't have a background. All right, so now we got to double click into here, change the type. Maybe just like a, quite dark right there. It's 373737. We'll take these, the actual quotes. This quote alignment got screwed up, so I kind of don't like exactly how it's adjusted. Well, right now it's in an auto layout. So if I come over here, remove that auto layout, now I can double click into here and select this and just move it. And that color is BD, BD, BD. So I can change this one as well. There we go. And then finally also change this. There's nowhere near enough contrast, plus it has this blue. So I can double click into here and change this. Right around there should work. I'm going to copy that color code and we'll apply it to the dash as well. Now it looks a little strange given this picture because it's white against here, so you can double click into here and add a stroke. And I wouldn't go with black because it just emphasizes it a little bit too much. So we could change this stroke on the outside, and then we could just make it like a gray. Somewhere right around there works pretty well. All right, so now we could take this, duplicate it, and duplicate it a few more times. And there's obviously a way that you can use that is 100% on a light side. Now, one thing you can also do with card design is you could take the background, and it doesn't have to be all gray. There could be a little bit of color in it if you wish, but we're gonna make it almost white, very close to being white. And then we detach this real quick and create the component. We can double click into here and make the fill white of the card container itself. Now, that's probably not quite enough, so I just want to make the background just a shade darker. Right around there looks pretty good. And there we go. So now we can duplicate this. And there's another version. So hopefully you can see how playing with the color and the contrast, also the different layout options can work pretty well. I wanted to show one final example where we're going to prototype an actual interaction with these where a person can drag these or click left or right arrows. So let's duplicate that. And what we'll do is we're going to create a couple more of these. Maybe we'll create one more. So we're going to take all these and we're going to group them up. We're going to put them like this, so you can kind of create like a carousel effect. And typically, a common pattern for this sort of thing, when one of them are cut off on the right or left, you can create a fade. So let me show you how to do that, just to make it look like they're kind of fading off into the oblivion. So now we could take our fill and change this to a linear gradient, and then get this structured in the correct orientation. So we want it to be a horizontal gradient, and right there is pretty good. And then we could select this color, and this color needs to be the same color as the background. And then we select this one, and this color needs to be the same color as the background, but take the opacity slider right here and drop it down. And look at that, looks pretty cool that way. So now we can duplicate this, right click, and then choose flip horizontal, and then just put it on the other side. And now they kind of just fade off into the into the sides of the user interface. And then what we can do, let's get some right and left arrows so people can click these. A front-end developer could use JavaScript to make them kind of just indefinitely move slowly as well. So what we can do is let's click on plugins and go to Iconify. Again, if you don't have it installed, make sure you get that installed. Do a search for arrow. I think we're going to use this one right here. Even though it's pointing down, we can rotate it. So I like it because it has a filled version too. So what we can do is just choose this, hold shift and get it, wrong way, Gary. We want it to point that way. There we go. Get it into a size that looks pretty good. And then we will put it right over here. Maybe right around there looks pretty good. And then what we can do is right click and we can create component and then add a variant, because on hover we can make this filled. So let's just come over here for a second and we'll go back to Iconify. We're going to choose the filled version. Now let's click on this to see the size. It is, width is 45 and the height is 45. So let's match those up as well. So 45 by 45. There we go. Get this into place. And we are going to put it right here. All right, so now that we don't see it anymore, we can go ahead and let's see here. 1 second. Let's find out where this is at. All right, so this is the actual component. So we're going to take our button group and we're going to place it over here. There, now it is inside of our variant 2. This should really be named hover. And now we'll take the default or the group below it and then just change it to 0% for the pass-through. All right, so now we'll switch to prototype and then we'll choose while hovering. Then what we can do is come to our assets panel. We'll put this over here. And then let's go ahead and click play to see if it works. There it goes. And then what we can do is duplicate this, put it over here, holding shift, make sure it stays on the same exact row, and then right click, flip horizontal. And we'll move it into place. If you want to make sure you're perfect, you can come over here to the design tab, choose your grid, change it to columns, and then just increase your margin. So that way we know this should go right here. All right, so then you can toggle that off if you wish as well, or hide it. All right, great. So now we'll check this out, and they both work. So what about this area if we wanted to make this draggable? So we could do that as well. So let's move this up over here. Go ahead and let's position this somewhere, maybe right here. Duplicate it, Control D, and then we'll move this group right over here. All right, so then we'll switch to the prototype tab, and then we'll add an interaction right to this one, and then this is going to be on drag. So let's see if that actually works. So now we can drag this and look at that. You can left click and just hold. And I'm going to leave it up to you to determine how to make it so that if you click these, like if you click this right arrow, it'll go to that other one. Very simple though to achieve.